G'day gang, Simo and Ed back for another episode of the Fastline Track Growth Show, where we talk all things karting and business.
Cool.
So, what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, in the last video we were talking about sabotage, but employee sabotage. It got a lot of views actually, so I think it's a topic that a lot of people were very interested in. But I think when we look in the mirror most days, we know there's a little bit of self-sabotage going on somewhere. Otherwise I'll be a lot leaner than I am already. So, every time I point at somebody, there's three pointing back at me, as they say. So we're going to talk a bit about self-sabotage and just talk about a few traits that we see commonly amongst go-kart track owners, and just bring to your awareness really, so you can have a look at those.
It's not just go-kart track owners, it's a lot of businesses.
Everybody
fail on at least one of these 10 items.
Yeah, it's gonna be one of those, isn't it? I think when we wrote the list out, I know we were just chuckling just prior to this, going looking at it, laughing, because there's a couple of things in there you're thinking, I've just got to double check I'm not doing that anymore. But so welcome to the club of self-sabotage. It's one of those. It's a rare club. We don't want you to be a member.
No.
So we're going to try and kick you back out the door. And,
no wooden sabots.
That's right. Get rid of your sabots. Stop throwing them in the machines. Let's end the sabotage right now.
So, the first one.
Yep.
Not having a vision, a mission, or values.
Yeah. Now I call it culture, you call it values, but similar sort of thing. But yeah, you need a mission, you need a vision, mission, culture statement for your business. And when people come and join you, I know you've had a new joiner recently, and you spent sort of a couple of hours with him just explaining, this is where we're headed. These are the things that need to be done along the way. So heading and where it's all going to end up, that's the vision. These are the things we've got to deal with, sort of the immediacy, the immediate battles really, is the mission. And then you talk a little bit about, this is how we do things around here.
The values, this is how we get things done. No, absolutely. We've got an onboarding that we do for all of our staff. So it goes through the first bits, a bit about the Fastline story. It's about how we got to where we are today, and of course that's peppered with our values. And then I go on about, I talk a little bit about the market, I talk a little bit about the brands and the products we sell. And then this is a vision, this is the mission, this is the way we work, our values. And then I sort of map out the company as I see it in the future.
Because it's really important, because I think if you don't tell them, they will decide for themselves. And if you get all your employees deciding for themselves how it's going to be done around here, you just end up in a living hell. Well, quite possibly. You might get a really good bunch of people actually, but the odds are against you. So make sure that people understand how it's done around here. You don't want them learning how to do things from the last person that was taken on board, and while they're just trying to muddle through things. And while they're trying to make stuff up, the vision will just keep them on track. It will give them a beacon to aim for. So at least there's a chance it will get right. It's an ongoing process. It's quite a tough one. So we self-sabotage as businesses once we don't take control of that.
It's a bit like flying a plane or sailing a ship. You're going to be blown off course from time to time, and you need that focal point in the distance that you know where you're heading.
Constantly, but the plane's the good analogy. It's almost always offline. So something like high 90% of the time, the aeroplane is not on the right trajectory. It has to keep altering. So it's a really good analogy for business.
And with the values, it's a good idea to catch people doing the right thing. So catch people living your values, and let them and let your team know about it. I mean, I think a couple of episodes back we talked about the cultural bingo that we did here.
You do. Yep.
That I need to reinstate.
Self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Get it back in there.
So I'll be off to Costco this afternoon to buy
prizes galore.
Prizes galore. Number 2.
Yep.
What's that?
No written goal. Your vision becomes a lot easier, I think, once you've got an idea of what you really want to get out of the business personally. So this is more personal goals. So your vision, mission, culture should be a corporate one. But it's always a smart idea to work out what you want from your business first of all. Otherwise, you're just sat there living on the dregs that it offers you. But actually, you have got complete control of your business if you write your goal down and then start with a plan on how to get there.
This is a huge one. You and I sat down and worked out what I wanted out of the business back in January 2020.
Yeah.
And although it's been a tough time because of COVID and that, but having that focus, we're nearly where we need to be.
Yeah, do you know what the big points where this really came to the fore? It's easy to sort of muddle along and think you're doing okay as a business. It's when something big happens that this really comes to the forefront. So when COVID hit, I remember we had that conversation on the phone and we were like, COVID's hit. Kart tracks are shutting down around the globe. We didn't know what was going to happen with the supply chain, all the rest of it. So it was just literally everything's just been thrown up in the air. And we were having that chat, and I said something to you like, this is what we agreed we would do by the end of the year. You remember this conversation? And you went, yeah. And I went, so how do we get there? And you're like, have you not heard anything I've just said? I've heard everything you've just said. But this is where it really matters, because if that's your goal and that's what we were going to do, then we were going to go and get that revenue generated at these profit margins to release this much cash, so that everybody can go and have the lifestyle that they're looking for. And then we talked a bit about what it means to the customers, and then on the back of that, that's where other innovative stuff starts to happen. All the Zoom calls that happened through COVID, all the conversations that we had, the number of phone calls. I even picked up some phone, like the phone occasion, spoke to some go-kart track owners. We just got into the basics and made sure that it happened. Works wonderful.
And I think it changes the way you look at your business and what you do within your business. And it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, there's two things, So it can be, and it does work like that. So there's a couple of other bits to add on to that. So if you're intrigued by what I'm not going to tell you today, write in. I'll share the other bit. But it does work like that. If you write it down, then that starts to work. But equally, it's just that steer. I can't describe it really. That overall steer that just gets you moving in the right direction. Too many people think that while they're busy, everybody's busy, right? Nobody's sat there wondering what to do next. While you're busy in your business, it's too easy to fall into that trap of I'm busy and I'm doing great work. And as a business owner, you've got to understand the difference between that strategic work that actually generates the extra income and the stuff that just keeps you sidetracked.
Working in your business as opposed to working on your business.
Yes, you've got to be totally aware all the time.
No, all the time.
Constantly, because it's so easy to fall back into this, and this is why people have people like me in the business, and you have people, go-kart track owners you speak to often, and we between you and me, we just give them a little nudge back online, and it just reminds them of what they're looking to achieve this year or over 3 years, whatever, how long it is for.
The third one?
Well, now you've got a goal.
Got to share it with the team.
You have.
You know? There's no point in having a secret goal.
That's right.
I'm not telling you my goal. Go away.
We need like a vault and a little safe down there. It's all...
the team's got to know what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, they're just not going to pick this up osmotically. They've got to really be told what the goal is, and they've got to get on board with it as well. So if you want to be around here, here's the goal, and this is the bit that you play in it, and this is what I really need you to do. I'm happy to have a two-way dialogue, but all things being equal and it being completely achievable, then you've got to get on board with it. Otherwise, there's not a fit here. On the other side of that, you do need to share the goals so that they can start making the right decisions at every turn while they're doing stuff day to day, because they will occasionally still have moments when they've got to make a snap decision. So you just hope if they can remember the vision, mission, culture, and they understand what the goal is at great detail because you've shared it with them, that they might just start making more of the right decisions. And I'm not so deluded that they're going to make every decision correct. And I was horrible early days of business. We're pouncing on everything, and really banging the drum, and now I'm just a lot more forgiving, just as long as they're making the decisions, the correct ones. More than half the time, I'll take that. we can model that.
Number 4.
4.
Not using the 10-minute huddle or prayer meeting, as some people call it.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I love this one, and it can be incredibly effective during hard times. I found the most benefit I've got is when we're going through troubled waters, and you got to keep the team on board, the team focused. So just spending 10 minutes in the morning, getting the whole team in, and that's a good place to catch someone doing it right, and praise them. And
well, the other thing is, I think as business owners generally, we're quite guilty that once you've got sort of this bigger goal in mind, or whatever it is you're looking to do that day, so whatever's in your head at that moment, and you've told somebody in your team and you've shared it with them once, we assume
they'll remember it. They won't.
Yeah, that they'll remember it, and then they'll change their behaviours, and off they go. But typically people have to go through this learn, understand and apply phase as well, so there's different levels to learning. So you have to keep repeating the message constantly, and it's nobody's job other than the business owners to do that.
Absolutely.
Now, you might delegate it and have a look, but it's still your responsibility to make sure that everybody, and it doesn't matter what position they hold in the company, understands this, and they'll only get that through repetition. So these 10-minute huddles are absolutely wonderful for that. And just getting into that dialogue regularly. I'm down here every couple of weeks. And the first thing I do, you saw me through the window. I was a good 10 minutes before I got to you, because what I'll do, I'll walk through the warehouse. I go and speak with the team. It's only for the warehouse. There's not a lot for me to add, but I just want to have a look at them. I want to see what the body language is doing. I want to see a smile. I just don't want to see if the whole warehouse is fretting. I now know that by the time I get to you, we need to have a chat. So I'm going to find out whether we've got a small one day thing happening there, or whether we've got a bigger problem. But just going through, and then I walk through everybody in the office before I sit down with you. And that takes me like 10 minutes, and I just get by the time I've got a feel for the whole company. So that's just checking in with them is really, really critical. If you can just pull small teams together. If you've got a small operation, it might be everybody. It might just be sub teams as well.
Yeah, larger companies that you'd have the warehouse huddle, and I think Tilly does a huddle with the warehouse team on a regular basis anyway.
No, does he? He's ex-military, so he's going to be good at that sort of chain of command and giving out information. I think you just want to make sure there's nowhere for anybody to hide.
Yeah.
So if your team's so big that people can hide,
then you've got problems.
Yeah, so you just want to bring that team down to something that's more manageable, so you can just double check that everything's understood, and no more than 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a lengthy meeting. Save that for the weekly or fortnightly meeting.
Number 5.
Yeah, there's the old adage in business.
You can't manage what you don't measure.
Exactly. So if you're not measuring,
you can't manage.
So what do you really want to manage in your business?
Well, it will be different for different departments.
So, and then the next question is then are you measuring it? Now this is, some people get involved in all sorts of stuff. I used to measure my business off my stationery cupboard. Have I ever told you this one?
No. I'm intrigued.
It would take me too long to explain it all, but essentially there was my office, there was all sorts of corridor, and then there was the office where an admin team were. And I used to walk in and out of my office into that office all the time. Now up in the corner there was an open stationery cupboard, some pigeonholes, and I could tell by the way the stationery was moving how well the company was doing. So I could tell that, because I'd know that not enough inquiry forms are being taken, or not enough compliment slips are going out, or the envelopes, we haven't used too many of those, or there's not a print order that's arrived this week. And I just had such a good feel from my stationery cupboard. Because it was open plan, I used to just look up, and I'd look up 2 or 3 times a week and just have a look at the cupboards. It was all ladies in that office. They all thought I was absolutely bloody crazy because they didn't know what I was doing. I never told them, but I could tell just by which stationery wasn't moving where my problem was in my company.
Wow.
Yeah, I should have just had the rulers next to it, done the percentages. But it just goes to show your measure. I mean, I could have done a measure with rulers on the side of every pigeonhole. They'd have thought I was even crazy. It gave me a real insight into whether we're getting enough inquiries, quotes, like what's going on, the tea and coffee. So we were very much a face-to-face organisation. It was one of my mantras. So if the tea and coffee wasn't going down fast enough, we haven't had enough face-to-face meetings. Who's supplying us? Have we met them? How did they get in here? So that became the culture. So I could tell so much of my stationery cupboard.
Wow.
I've forgotten, I never told you that.
Ah, never knew that.
It comes from my days. I used to be something called a business analyst.
Right.
And I got fascinated when I was in IT because what happens is everybody says, what reports do you need is what you say when you're a fledgling business analyst. And of course, big corporates, and that's who I was working with, were going, everything. And they go, no, you don't want everything. There's 850 reports or 1,000 reports. How many do you need? We will use them all. So then you'd sit them down in a process and try and get them to discount some of them. No, we need everything. With one well-known large banking and insurance global giant, notice I haven't mentioned their name, they did that to me when I was a fledgling rookie and knew no better. What I did was I printed one off of every single report. And I went and bought a print stick, glue stick, and I left the top sort of dozen or so reports loose, and then I glued together all the other reports and left them in a box for each of, and there's about half a dozen managers had to decide on this next meeting. How did you get on with those reports? They were wonderful, thank you. Nobody said anything. Did anybody notice I glued the reports together? And they all burst out laughing. I said, should we get into something more manageable? So not only managing, but also you need to run your business off probably 5 to 7 reports. So when you start to look at this in a broader picture, my stationery cupboard was brilliant. There's one quick report at a glance, and I could just tell you by looking at it for about 40 seconds. If you've got 5 or 7 reports that are running everything, you're pretty much there. But what it will do is it will condense down, narrow down the real success factors in your business as well. And then that becomes very manageable and they're very simple.
Yeah. And if you put it on a scorecard?
Yes. I don't really use them a lot, but you're absolutely right.
No, I don't use them either. I get a weekly report of sales, which I do call numbers.
Yep.
The 3 call numbers. Sales, average sales. That's about...
Yeah, in sales, you'll know this, but I talk about how activity determines your altitude. So for a sales call environment, it's all I want to know is how many calls have you made? And then the second thing is what sort of stuff have you been discussing? That's all I ever really look at. Because I know if we get those 2 things right, the results will come.
They're just drop into place.
Yeah, so most sales operations will just look at the sales figures and say we need more sales, like that means anything to anybody. But I can't measure more sales if I don't understand the activity. But I can certainly say at the current rate you need to make 30% more phone calls. I've now measured that really accurately. So get smart about what you're actually measuring and what you're getting involved in. I don't need to get involved in the whole sales process. I just need 2 things in there. Now I can manage my whole sales team with just those 2 items. So that gets really simple then. It's fantastic.
Cool. Well, that's probably a good point to stop.
Good.
And end this week's episode.
Have you measured this?
Yes, I have measured it.
Good.
I've got the timer going on the side here.
I can see you are measuring it.
So, there's our first part on self-sabotage. So let's hope you're not doing too many of these. And if you are, we can work on correcting them. So,
give us a call if you need a hand with anything.
So that's it for us from this week. We'll see you next week.
See you soon.
Ciao.
Bye.